Brexit, Trump, ugly forms of populism, polarization. These are only a shock to the ruling elite and their panel of experts, who have been blinded by their own institutions and their flawed opinion polls. Enough with the cries of the angry white male voter, racism, chauvinism, and xenophobia. Inside even the most poorly expressed grievances, there can often be found a grain of truth, which on its own can sometimes even be morally defensible, even if the ideas cloaked around it cannot. The problem is that all sides are either unable to identify and express these grains of truth, and so default to the often ugly generalizations they lie within, or due to their own unreasonable biases, extreme political correctness for example, they are unwilling to address these legitimate concerns head on at all, and would rather just call anything other than their own position racist or right-wing. The longer these legitimate concerns lying within these grievances are not addressed, the slide towards unsavory populism will continue, and the mudslinging and name-calling will only fuel the resentment and lead to more hideous generalizations. The fact is that the masses see their opportunity to better their own lives and that of their children sink in the stagnation of the status quo. Fed misinformation by a biased media controlled by the elite themselves and talked down to by experts who have proven time and time again to be wrong, they are angry. Their gut knows something is wrong. They just can't pinpoint it or often fully express it. But one thing is for sure, the existing power structure is not providing them with any clear hope of a better future. When the choice is a safe stagnation or a risky chance at a better life, people have shown over and over again their willingness to risk much, even for only a slim chance at a better life, regardless of their actual material conditions. If you can't change an existing system, you have to break it and start again. Let us be very clear. The current populism is often not a vote directly for any of these people or the ideas they represent, but more a vote against the establishment. The aim is to break the existing system through whatever means presents itself. The Greens can be this alternative. The Greens must be this alternative to the current establishment, because the other alternatives gaining momentum at the moment often bring with them consequences for the environment and human rights which the Greens cannot ignore. Instability, be it economic or political, always leads to a deterioration of conditions for the environment and human rights, particularly for minorities. People feel that something is wrong. It is a subconscious instinct and all the more powerful for it. They know there is something wrong with international trade, immigration, wealth distribution, economic management, society in general. They just can't put their finger on it, and so often default to reactionary stances simply because of a lack of an alternative. The Greens must show a new alternative. It must address the fears of the people and must importantly provide hope. And to do this, it must principally address the core concerns of most individuals, the economy. To achieve its goals for the environment and human rights, one thing must take center stage, the economic outlook of the people. Occupied people with an outlook of betterment is what allows for good environmental and social conditions. The Greens are in a unique position in that they hold no set allegiance to any existing stakeholders or ideological thought. Their allegiance is to the environment and the people. Being able to pick the best of all ideologies and schools of thought without alienating any internal stakeholders, they can cherry-pick any economic and trade policies from any existing institutions or dogma that would align with their core values. Values such as returning power to the people, human rights, including reforms for a truly transparent government, the implementation of a low and flat income tax, low taxes in general, except for an increased land value tax and a high wealth tax, above 100 to 1,000 times the median wealth. This encourages the creation of wealth and jobs and discourages the retention of wealth, stagnation. Simplification of the tax code, stronger top-down enforcement, less loopholes, the implementation of stable money, necessary for a strong economy, and to stop the artificial tax of inflation. For example, a peg to gold, like a currency board, except to the value of gold. Reform of the financial sector away from the casino it has become and towards its single useful function of being a facilitator for industry and growth. Implement changes towards a small government, less bureaucracy and red tape, negative income tax instead of extensive welfare programs, and other measures that put the power back in the people's hands and decrease the percentage of state-controlled money in the economy. Less hurdles for small and medium businesses and startups, simpler regulation that is better enforced, EU reforms, decentralization of the control of finances, deconstruction of the bureaucracy, single EU army for economy of scale with notable better defense capacity, and restricted offensive capacity due to the unanimous voting system that would inevitably be required for such an offensive action. Values such as a global environment and global working conditions, including changes to foreign trade agreements, introduction of a carbon/pollution tax and health and safety tax on all products coming from countries with lower regulatory standards, including intermediary countries still trading freely with countries with lower standards, clear and simple processes for individual foreign companies to gain exemptions by improving their standards, and strong policing to ensure that they actually do, thus encouraging an improvement in foreign conditions while protecting domestic companies against an uneven playing field, bilateral trade agreements with the developing countries, trade blocs, etc. Values such as basic human rights, on a global scale, clearly differentiate between permanent migrants and temporary refugees, economic or otherwise. Permanent migrants want to assimilate into the new culture. Refugees, economic or political, want to continue their own culture and are therefore only there temporarily. The people of a country receiving migrants and refugees have just as much right to perpetuate their own culture than others do. And the difference is, locals have nowhere else to migrate to. The point is often overlooked. For temporary refugees, or even economic migrants, there needs to be a clear plan to provide them with an opportunity to gain skills and preferably some capital for their return to their own country, in such a way that it benefits the refugees and is no burden to the country providing refuge, preferably a bonus for all sides. The opportunity should also be taken to expose the refugees to the benefits of modern progressive values and thought practices that they may not have access to back home. Foreign policy needs to improve the social and environmental conditions of all developing countries around the world. The aim is to export knowledge and progressive values, not import ignorance and regressive values. This can be achieved by training up foreigners and letting them get back home. The untapped potential of the developed world is enormous. We need to focus on developing the whole world with the assistance of the locals. We should not force those unwilling to relinquish their own culture to assimilate just to be part of a lucky few allowed access to the caged-free society while the rest of the world burns. Neither should we force the locals of a free society to adapt their own culture to immigrants who are unwilling to relinquish their own, often enough, regressive values. Help them turn their own countries into a place they want to be. This is a bright future we can all aim for, one we can all move forward together.